Discover the miraculous secrets of 2 Samuel, a transforming journey through God's sacred plan. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, amid the rolling hills of ancient Israel, the divine tapestry of God's plan began to unfold through a humble shepherd turned king. David, chosen by God and anointed by the prophet Samuel, now sat upon his throne in Hebron, the air thick with the fragrance of olive oil, a symbol of his divine appointment. As he surveyed his kingdom, victories filled his days, yet his heart carried the weight of responsibility, a covenant with Yahweh that tethered his soul to the well-being of his people. Yet even amid victory, shadows lurked within. One fateful evening, he wandered upon the rooftop of his palace, his gaze drawn to Bathsheba, bathing in the moonlight, a vision of beauty that ignited an uncontrollable fire within him. In that moment of temptation, the crown of leadership slipped from his hands as he succumbed to earthly desires. The echoes of praise from his loyal subjects faded into the background, consumed by the single act that would unravel the very fabric of his reign. David, burdened by his sin, orchestrated the death of Uriah, Bathsheba's devoted husband, sending him to the front lines of battle under the pretense of leadership. The act was heinous, concealed beneath the guise of a king's duty, yet within his heart it festered like a wound threatening his legacy. The battlefield bore silent witness to both glory and destruction, as David's heart sought to cloak the darkness, but the eyes of the Creator pierced through the veil of deceit. Then came the turning point, a moment of divine confrontation. Nathan, a prophet of the Lord, approached David with a parable that cut through the king's defenses. The simplicity of the story, of a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb, grew heavy in the air. Each word fell like stones, crystallizing the truth David desperately sought to evade. As Nathan spoke, the gravity of betrayal crashed upon him like waves upon the shore. David, once a man after God's own heart, now faced the unraveling of peace within his household. The divine judgment echoed in Nathan's voice, serving as both warning and heartbreak. In the aftermath of revelation, David was cast into a storm of despair. The peaceful halls of his palace transformed into a battlefield as conflicts emerged, even from his own son Absalom. The tapestry of his rule began to fray. The rebellion he had once enacted now mirrored in the rebellion of his own blood. It was from this depth of anguish that he turned to the Lord, seeking refuge in the only source of hope left, his intimate relationship with Yahweh. In his sorrow, he poured out his heart into the haunting words of Psalm 51, a cry of desperation intertwined with a burning desire for restoration and reconciliation with his God. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select all notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now, let's continue with what the Lord did next. Amidst David's turmoil, a glimmer of hope arose, for Nathan reminded him of God's unwavering covenant love, a promise that transcended failure. Would David embrace this grace? Could a broken man rise from the ashes of despair? As forgiveness beckoned, the tension remained palpable. The remnants of sin and divine grace danced before his heart, paving the way for the next chapter in David's life, a story where redemption awaited, promising transformation through trials yet to be woven into the narrative of faith. And it came to pass, as the sun began its descent over the hills of Judah, that David found himself a man divided. The whispers of his sin echoed through the chambers of his mind, fueling his inner turmoil as he wrestled with the depths of his heart. The shadows of guilt clung to him like a heavy cloak, yet the words of Nathan resonated, a divine promise flickering on the horizon. In the days that followed Nathan's revelation, David sought solitude within the confines of his palace. He would often gaze out upon the rolling hills of his kingdom, the same hills where he once danced before the Lord. But this time, instead of joy, he felt the weight of his failings. It was not mere regret that filled him. It was the piercing sting of the consequences of his actions as chaos stirred within his household. In the stillness, the Lord stirred the heart of David, and he again turned toward prayer. With fervor, he beseeched Yahweh for mercy, as a true penitent heart seeks the face of the Almighty. "Create in me a clean heart, O God," he cried, "and renew a right spirit within me." His prayer echoed through the silence, a lamentation for the soul lost amid the tempest of sin. The cries of his people reached his ears, tales of Absalom's growing rebellion sweeping like wildfire through the land. Absalom, handsome and charismatic, drew the hearts of Israel to himself, whispering sweet promises of freedom from the king's burdens. The fickleness of the people mirrored the foolishness of the choices they made, enraptured by the glimmer of a foreign allure. One day, while seated in mourning, David received a report announcing the profound treachery of his son. Swallowed by despair, he recognized the consequences of his own failings reflected in Absalom's revolt. How could he have allowed a seed of discontent to grow into a tree of rebellion? Yet even within this darkness, a flicker of God's understanding shone through as he recalled the promise made to him. Though the path ahead was one of sorrow, the Lord's covenant remained unbroken. With heavy heart, yet determined resolve, David gathered his loyal servants and retreated from the city of Jerusalem, tears mingling with his prayers as he fled before the storm of his son. The very palace that once belonged to his glory now felt alien, a place of shadow rather than light. Each step away from his throne was a thrust into the wilderness. Yet David believed, as he walked with the Lord, even despair could become a tutor of faith. As the king ascended the Mount of Olives, barefoot and weeping, the air around him crackled with divine tension. He remembered the vow of God, a promise that had forever linked his lineage with the divine purpose unfolding through the ages. "You are my son. Today I have begotten you," the words of the covenant echoed through his spirit, igniting within him a hope that the Lord was still at work, even through the chaos. But as David looked out among the distant hills, the voice of Absalom rang clear like a trumpet of rebellion, emerging from the shadows to seize the kingdom. The fate of kings lay in the balance, and the road towards redemption seemed shrouded in an even deeper darkness. What could the outcome be but a struggle for the throne? Yet God's sovereign hand weaved even this rebellion into his grand design, the architect of salvation operating through every turn of the narrative. Will the heart of a father find reconciliation in the arms of a rebellious son? David pondered, feeling the weight of destiny rest upon him. And as he paused upon that solemn mountain, the resolution awaited, like an uncarved stone, hidden under the rubble of despair. Did the Lord dare to intervene once more? What would this calamity reveal about the divine plan of restoration that lay ahead, poised to break forth into a promise yet unfulfilled? And it came to pass, as David stood upon the Mount of Olives, his heart heavy with lamentation, he was met by the sight of a messenger rushing towards him. The dust from the road clung to the man's garments, and as he reached David, breathless with urgency, he brought news of greater treachery that had taken root among the hearts of men. "Your son Absalom has stolen the hearts of Israel," cried the messenger. his voice trembling under the weight of the announcement, as if he bore a burden no man should carry. He has declared himself king in Hebron, and the people flock to him, saying, "Long live the king." A cold dread enveloped David, echoing the pain he felt upon first hearing of Absalom's disobedience. "O Lord," he breathed, "what have I done that my own flesh should rise against me?" His countenance fell, and he was gripped by the piercing sorrow of a father's heart. Yet within that pain, the fire of a king flickered. "Gather the men," he commanded his faithful followers.
"We must act swiftly. We shall not allow this rebellion to lead our people into ruin. We will rally those who have remained faithful to me, and we shall seek to return what is righteous in the eyes of God." Thus he gathered those who remained loyal and retreated toward the wilderness, knowing well that dangers lurked in every shadow, plotting and triggering betrayal. As they journeyed, David lifted his voice in prayer once more, seeking the face of the Almighty. "Deliver me from my son, O Lord, for I do not desire this strife. I seek a heart turned toward you, even if it be through this bitter lesson," he uttered through tears, his breath quickening with devotion amid despair. As David and his followers traversed the rugged paths leading from Jerusalem, the words of Nathan reminded him of the altars erected by his ancestors. Despite his sins, they were the testimony of the Almighty's forgiveness and mercy, revealing that even in the depths of despair, God's loving kindness could prevail. The murmur of men followed quietly in the wake of the king, their spirits drawn to his resolve. Among them was Ittai the Gittite, who had, though a foreigner, pledged his loyalty to David. "As the Lord lives, and my lord the king lives," declared Ittai, "wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my God." His words brought comfort to the weary heart of David. Yet in the tumult of the present, Absalom's ambition grew bolder. He called upon Ahithophel, whose counsel was known throughout Israel as wise and wise enough to sway the hearts of many. The two conspired against David, fabricating plans that would thrust the throne into a greater storm. It became apparent that the chasm between father and son had deepened, plunging them into darkness far beyond rebellion. It had pierced the very soul of a fractured family. Even as anxiety loomed like a dark cloud over the land of Judah, David found solace in the covenant God established with him. "Your seed shall endure forever," rang within his heart, igniting a flame of hope. In moments of such turmoil, God often reveals his greater purposes through fracture and strife. What will come of this battle? David wondered aloud. Shall I have the grace to face my son in his rebellion, to extol mercy instead of vengeance? For your mercy is greater than my fears. And as the weight of his destiny loomed larger, a profound realization eclipsed his despair. Behind the tumult of rebellion was a thread of divine sovereignty unfolding, ready to culminate in a destiny written long ago. Could it be that even through Absalom's insurrection, God prepares a way of redemption, a bridge to connection rather than destruction? David mused, unsettled yet intrigued by the Lord's intentions. Little did he know that the path of suffering often leads to unexpected revelations. The very essence of God's redemptive plan, weaving its way through a tapestry of pain and promise untold, awaiting the moment of revelation that would break forth. Thus the tale of a father and son continued, the outcome entrusted to the hand of God, hidden within the preparation of the Almighty's larger narrative. What mysteries lay ahead, as the heart of a father yearned for reconciliation while a kingdom teetered on the brink of division? The answer awaited, for the clock of providence ticked ever steadily toward a divine encounter.
And it came to pass that David and his followers found refuge at the river Jordan, the water flowing swiftly, carrying aloft the sorrows of the land. David sat among his men, their faces marked by uncertainty, yet their hearts clung to hope, for they knew the Lord God had chosen him. "Be strong and courageous," David spoke, lifting his eyes toward the heavens, as if seeking affirmation from the Almighty. "For he who led us out of Egypt, who granted us this land, shall not abandon us in our hour of need." As dusk settled over the valley, one of David's counselors approached him. It was Zadok, the high priest, bearing the sacred Ark of the Covenant. "Take courage, O king," Zadok said, his voice steady. "The Ark of God has come to be with us. Let us seek the Lord together." Then David, moved with gratitude, replied, "If I perish, I shall still honor my God. Yet let the ark remain in the city. If it is the Lord's will for me to return in peace, then his presence shall be with me." So the ark was left in Jerusalem, a reminder of God's steadfast covenant. Little did David know that amidst the trials, the Lord was sowing the seeds of redemption through those near to him, using even the heart of a counselor like Ahithophel, who had once served him but now sided with Absalom. As night enveloped the land, the whispers of betrayal reached Absalom and his council. "Ahithophel," Absalom inquired, "what should be our first course of action against my father?" Ahithophel replied with shrewdness, "Go unto your father's concubines, whom he left to keep the house. Show Israel your strength, for all will see that you have broken with David and that you are king." This counsel pleased Absalom, and he did as Ahithophel advised, bringing him further separation from David, which added fuel to the fire of rebellion. Yet, unbeknownst to them, their actions unwittingly fulfilled the word of the Lord spoken to David through Nathan the prophet. Meanwhile, David continued to beseech the Lord on the banks of the river. "O God of Israel, behold my lamentation. If you deliver me from the hands of my son, I will declare your faithfulness from the heights of Zion." As the dawn broke, a messenger from the city approached David. It was Hushai, the friend of David, who had convinced his heart to follow him. "My lord, do not fear," he proclaimed. "I have come to you as an ally, for I will go into the city and report as if I am loyal to Absalom. Yet my heart is with you." David, recognizing the providential hand of the Lord in Hushai's arrival, said, "If you go, then use your wisdom to thwart the counsel of Ahithophel. May God grant you success in your mission." And so it was that as war drums echoed through the mountains, God orchestrated the hearts of men, turning treachery against treachery. With each step, the weight of destiny bore down on David, revealing the intricate designs of divine sovereignty woven through human actions. In the distance, the army stirred, anxious for battle. The winds carried an unsettling whisper, as if the very heavens trembled at the impending conflict. How could a mere man stand against the tide set forth by his own flesh and blood? What was to become of a kingdom thus challenged from within? In the heart of David was a growing hope. Perhaps through this turmoil, the Lord would light a path to reconciliation, a chance for redemption veiled in the guise of sorrow. Thus the stage was set, the players aligned, and the fate of kings and nations rested in the unseen hand of God. What revelation awaited in the unfolding drama, as the tumult of conflict loomed ever closer, challenging the very fabric of faith? The answer lay in the divine will, waiting patiently to reveal itself amidst the chaos of human strife. And it came to pass, as Hushai departed from David, that he ventured back into the city under the disguise of allegiance to Absalom. His heart, however, was steadfast towards his true king, and thus he prayed silently for wisdom, seeking the favor of the Lord. In the chambers of Absalom, the atmosphere was charged with ambition and fervor. "Bring me Ahithophel," he commanded, eager to solidify his plans against David. As Ahithophel entered, a shadow of cunning and foresight encompassed him. "What shall we do?" asked, desperation mingling with a lust for power. Ahithophel, his countenance unyielding, replied, "Let us pursue your father while he is weary and weak, and strike him down at the core. For if we do this swiftly, the hearts of the men will rally under you." This counsel seemed wise in the sight of Absalom, who was determined to root out David's influence. Yet, unbeknownst to them, Hushai had devised a countermeasure. He quickly approached Absalom, and with a voice laced with wisdom he said, "Nay, this is not the way. Your father is a mighty warrior, and those with him are valiant men. Like a bear robbed of her cubs, he is fierce. Should you attack him directly, it will bring devastation upon yourselves." Hushai continued, "Rather, gather your strength throughout all Israel. Then, when you have mustered a great host, lead them against him as a tempest. For thus shall you strike terror into each heart and solidify your reign." Absalom's heart was swayed by the allure of strength in numbers, and he saw wisdom in Hushai's counsel. At this moment, the hand of the Almighty was at work, for in the depths of Absalom's heart the Lord turned his opinion, as he had said through the lips of Nathan to David. Thereby the counsel of Hushai prevailed, and the plan set forth by Ahithophel fell to the ground as a fragile reed. Meanwhile, in the wilderness, David sensed the brewing storm, feeling the weight of betrayal bear down upon him. His spirit was troubled, yet he sought solace in the Lord. "O God, guide me through this darkness. Let not my adversaries rejoice in their treachery." He implored the heavens for divine intervention, for he knew that it was only the Lord who could deliver him from such peril. It was at this time that David's trusted men, Benaiah and the mighty men of valor, stood resolute, prepared to protect their king. "We shall follow you, O David, wherever you lead," they declared with fervor, lifting their swords in solidarity. Their conviction ignited a fire within David's heart, reminding him that God's promises were still alive. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the skies with hues of crimson and gold, the armies began to mobilize against one another. The clash of steel and the cries of men echoed eerily, a testament of loyalty and betrayal. David stood before his men, and with a voice loud and clear he declared, "Remember the God who has called us, for the battle belongs to the Lord." Thus, with an unseen force guiding them, they prepared for the conflict, each man's heart stirred with the fervent hope of the faithful. Yet looming ahead was the question that hung in the air like a heavy mist. What destiny awaited David, God's appointed king, as the thunder of war approached, threatening to envelop them? In this crucible of turmoil, would the wrath of Absalom prevail, or would the steadfast love of the Lord shine forth in unexpected ways? As the night descended and the stars aligned, the cries of battle promised more than mere conflict. They heralded the unfolding of God's sovereign plan, yet to be unveiled through the very strife that threatened to consume them. And it came to pass, in the midst of turmoil, that David, having gathered his faithful men, raised his voice in prayer. "O Lord, hear my cries. Be my shield in this hour of darkness. Let not the wicked prevail against me." With each fervent plea he sought the heart of God, confident that the one who had called him would uphold him. As dawn broke, casting rays of hope upon the weary souls, the armies of Absalom began to gather. A vast multitude assembled, their hearts fervent with ambition, yet unknowing of the shroud of despair that would soon envelop them. Absalom, adorned in regal garments, surveyed his forces, yet within him stirred a flickering anxiety as he thought of the man he sought to dethrone. In the tents of Absalom, Ahithophel again offered counsel, yet the whisper of Hushai lingered in Absalom's ears. "Let us not be hastened to battle," Absalom spoke uncertainly, "for if we wage war before we are ready, we may seal our doom." And the counsel of Hushai was remembered, for it was indeed a wisdom not of this world. Meanwhile, in the hidden regions of the wilderness, David's heart was heavy with both dread and hope. The Lord had prompted him to prepare for the dark hours ahead. "Let us divide our forces," he instructed his men, "for while we are few, we are mighty in the Lord, and he shall lead us." As both armies faced each other, the air became thick with anticipation, one side driven by treachery, the other by divine purpose. David encouraged his men with words of fortitude, proclaiming, "The Lord will fight for us. Stand firm, and let your hearts be strong." Hope mingled with resolve, and confidence surged within his loyal followers. And as the time of battle drew near, David called for a man named Ittai the Gittite, who had joined him in his flight. "Why do you come with me? Return to your place, for you are a foreigner among us." Ittai, steadfast in his loyalty, looked into the eyes of David and responded, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord goes, whether for life or for death, there will your servant be." This declaration ignited a fire in the hearts of the men around him. With banners raised high, they moved toward the confrontation, united under the banner of divine providence, and their cries rose to the heavens, woven with faith. The armies of Absalom charged forth, filled with the arrogance of rebellion, like waves crashing against a fortified shore. As the two forces collided, a fierce battle ensued. The sound of sword against sword was like thunder, echoing through the hills. David's forces, though outnumbered, fought valiantly, fueled by the promise of God's deliverance. The Lord had set the stage for a demonstration of his power, orchestrating each event to fulfill his sovereign purpose. But among the chaotic clash, Absalom rode forth, his heart consumed with the thought of vanquishing his father. Yet a sense of trepidation stirred within him, for the words of Hushai haunted his mind. "What if this day does not unfold as I desire? What if the Lord's hand is against me?" In that fateful moment, as fate would have it, a wild mule bore Absalom into a thicket of low branches, and his head became entangled, leaving him suspended like a fallen leaf in the wind. Unbeknownst to him, this incident would soon seal his fate. Thus the battle waged on, the heart of Israel divided, and the destiny of a kingdom hung precariously in the balance. As David awaited news of the battle, the reality of what was at stake enveloped him, for deeper truths lay in the heart of every victor and vanquished. And so it was, through strife and turmoil, the providential hand of God began to unveil the next chapter in his divine narrative, echoing through eternity, preparing to reveal what destiny awaited the true king of Israel, and what would become of the rebellious heart of Absalom. And it came to pass, as the clash of swords echoed fiercely above the veil, that the hearts of David's men were emboldened, yet laden with the weight of uncertainty. Each breath they drew was a prayer, each swing of their swords a testament to the faith that stirred within them. In the thick of battle, David breathed deeply and fixed his gaze upon the heights of the hills that surrounded the field. "Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord," he declared, rallying his warriors with renewed fervor. The battle raged with an intensity unlike any other, fratricidal violence tearing through the fabric of Israel. David's small band of fighters, united by loyalty and love for their king, danced like leaves in a storm, deftly maneuvering against the tide of enemies who surged forth with the ferocity of a lion. Yet, through the chaos, the hand of God moved prominently, unseen yet mighty. Amidst the fray, a brave soldier named Abishai, nephew of Joab, approached David as he watched the unfolding turmoil. "O king, let me go and strike down Absalom, for he seeks your life," he implored, eyes aflame with righteous zeal. But David, overwhelmed with the burden of fatherly love despite the treachery, held up a hand and with sorrowful conviction replied, "Do not harm him, for if the Lord desires judgment, it shall be his, not ours." As the sun hung high, illuminating the battlefield with a stark brilliance, the Lord's resolve began to unfold. Absalom, caught in the thicket, became a mere pawn in a game far larger than himself. His men, blinded by the allure of power, faltered at the sight of their leader's plight. Whispers of fear spread through the ranks, and it was as if the very spirit of rebellion began to tremble. It was then that a young man, seeing the opportunity in the turn of events, spurred his horse to where Joab stood among the crowd. "I have news," he cried, bursting forth with breathless urgency. Joab's ears pricked at the words, for he understood the gravity of every moment. The battle is fierce, and the heart of Absalom is caught under the branches. The king's enemies hesitate. Now is the time to strike. But Joab, whose heart was guarded by wisdom, hesitated. What good will it do to kill the king's son? His life may still hold purpose should the Lord's mercy prevail. Yet, at that moment, judgment was proclaimed in the heavens. Joab, moved not by violence but by conviction, grasped the moment. He rallied his men, calling forth their pride. "Let us finish this conflict in honor, for the Lord fights with us. We pursue not only the death of a man, but the restoration of a kingdom."
As Joab led the charge toward the thicket where Absalom hung suspended, the battle began to reflect the moral divide, as if heaven itself conspired with noble intention. Underneath the branches, Absalom's heart swelled with terror, understanding in a flash the depths of his rebellion. A crushing realization pierced through his vain aspirations. The Lord's anointed was indeed not bound to the whims of man. And as their swords drew near, a whisper rippled through the air, heavenly echoes promising deliverance even through apparent defeat. David had prayed for Absalom's life, and in that intercession, divine providence awaited. Unbeknownst to Absalom, a greater cost lay just ahead. The battle began to wind down, the chaos giving way to a silence pregnant with expectancy. The multitudes, their hearts still clashing, began to sense a divine reckoning unfolding. Thus, within the heart of turmoil and turmoil itself, a new trajectory for the future of Israel was forged, unveiling that through suffering and sacrifice, the sovereign plan of the Almighty would echo through generations. What would become of Absalom, suspended between life and death, and what fate awaited the king who so deeply loved his son? And it came to pass, as the sun began to wane, casting a golden hue upon the battlefield, that the murmurs of the men grew still. Amongst the clashing din, a solemn air of anticipation took hold. For the hearts of David's warriors could not simply rejoice in their deliverance, nor could they celebrate a victory untainted by the sorrow of a father's heart. Joab, with sword in hand and a heavy heart, approached the thicket where Absalom clung, ensnared not only by branches, but by the weight of his own rebellion. As he drew near, he glanced back toward his king, whose eyes searched the horizon for mercy amidst calamity. "O Lord," he whispered within, "may you guide my hand in justice balanced with compassion." Then, in a moment of tragic clarity, Joab beheld the figure of Absalom, with long hair caught in the boughs like a vine amongst thorns. With a resolute heart, Joab commanded his armor-bearers, "Let us bring an end to this treachery." Yet the fear of David's grief gripped his soul. Who amongst them could bring a wound more profound than the blood of a king's son? Would they not be branded as monsters in the annals of history? As Joab approached Absalom, he raised his sword, feeling the weight of every promise David had made to God, a covenant cutting deeper than any blade.
Absalom's eyes, wild with desperation, pleaded for reprieve. "Have mercy," he cried, echoing the forsaken pleas of countless transgressors. Yet his fate had been sealed long before, for his choices had sown the seeds of rebellion. "Foolish son," Joab spoke with an air of somber authority, "you have chased shadows, forsaking the blessings of the Most High." With a heavy heart, Joab plunged the sword into Absalom, ending the treachery that had threatened the kingdom. Yet, as the prince fell, Joab felt as though he had pierced not merely the flesh of a man, but the very soul of a father. The cry that rose from the camp of David was unlike any heard before. It was a sound that split the heavens, a lamentation that shook the very foundations of Israel. David, upon hearing the heart-wrenching news, fell to the ground, mourning with a deep anguish. "Oh, Absalom, my son," he cried, echoing the raw truth of every father's love that transcends even the bitterest betrayal. The warriors, once emboldened by battle, now stood paralyzed in sorrow. They were caught between victory and mourning, knowing that in the death of Absalom, a new chapter of pain began to unfold. Yet, in the great wrestling of soul and spirit, a truth begot revelation. For in the tapestry of God's design, the threads of love and judgment intertwined. David's tears reached up to heaven's gates, where the sorrows of a father converged with the wisdom of a sovereign God. He felt the very weight of grace. The sustenance of God flowed in the depths of grief. As the sun sets upon a day of reckoning, what shall tomorrow hold? Questioned David, his heart torn, yet open to the will of the Almighty. In that moment of despair, the echoes of prophetic whispers still lingered, words spoken to Samuel, proclaiming that God looks upon the heart. God's plan was greater than the actions of man, and he would weave even the darkest threads into a glorious design. Thus, among the shadows cast by sorrow and loss, the faithful wait, for the promise of restoration lies just beyond the horizon. But how would the heart of Israel navigate this journey through darkness, and what sovereign purpose awaited within the apparent silence of divine providence? And it came to pass that David rose from the ground, his heart heavy with sorrow, as he poured out his lament. "O Absalom, my son, would God I had died for thee!" The words echoed through the camp, a mournful cry that spread among the people like wildfire. A time of despair enveloped the once jubilant warriors, turning their boasts of victory into silence and grief. In the days that followed, a deep shadow fell upon Israel. The news of Absalom's death traveled swiftly, and the hearts of the people were laden with burdens too great to bear. The whispers of what might have been mingled with regret and the stark realization of a fractured kingdom. They beheld their king lost in the anguish of a father's heart, and sorrow gripped them tightly. Joab, observing the desolation that had settled over the camp, approached the king with a heart full of truth and a voice edged with urgency. "My lord, why do you weep for the one who sought your destruction? For Absalom, though your son, has led Israel into chaos. If the kingdom is to stand, you must rise from this grief and return to the people." His words, though stern, bore the weight of wisdom and necessity. David, still enveloped in his mourning, raised his gaze toward Joab, and within his sorrow he felt a flicker of resolve. The kingdom awaited his command. "What shall I do, Joab? How do I mend the brokenness of my land?" he uttered, each word heavy with the burden of kingship. "Gather the hearts of the people, unite them with courage, and lead them back into the light of your reign," Joab urged, his tone gentle yet firm. "For even in this darkness, there is the promise of restoration. Remember the Lord thy God, who has always been your shield and stronghold." With those words, David stood, knowing that the path of leadership often treaded through valleys of deepest sorrow. He drew breath and called into the people, "Let all of Israel be assembled, for though we mourn, we are not lost to despair. We shall rise together." The gathering formed, a tapestry of faces marked by grief and weariness. With a heart full of both sorrow and strength, David spoke to them, reminding them of their faithful God. "Fear not, for the Lord is with us, and though we have lost one, let not our unity be fractured. God's purpose is higher than our understanding, and he shall weave our sorrows into joy." The people listened, their hearts stirred by the spirit of his words. A glimmer of hope lit the horizon, even as the memories of battle weighed heavily upon them. They stirred, their resolve kindling anew, like coals caught in the breath of the wind. But unknown to David and the people of Israel, God's sovereign plan began to unfold in the shadows of their mourning. For the heart of David, though bruised, was purposed toward greater things. Within the kingdom's heartache lay lessons of grace, forgiveness, and a deeper love that only the trials could birth. In this transforming journey through sorrow, as hearts turned towards hope, the Lord was weaving a narrative far beyond what any could see. For in the depths of their lament, he prepared the dawn of restoration, and a covenant promise awaited fulfillment. A promise hinted at in the silence, potent as a seed lying in the dark earth, waiting for the breath of spring. Thus the faithful awaited, not knowing the unfolding of God's miraculous secrets that would soon awaken their land anew, transforming mourning into rejoicing. What unforeseen wonders lay ahead? The whispers of heaven beckoned, and the heart of Israel would soon bear witness to the astonishing works of God among them. And it came to pass that the days of mourning began to fade. As the sun rose over the land of Israel, casting light upon the shadowy valleys, David, once again filled with purpose, ascended to lead his people from sorrow into the light of hope. He stood before the assembled nation, and with eyes glistening with both loss and resolve, declared, "The Lord has not abandoned his covenant with us. Even now does he weave our lives into a tapestry of grace." And it came to pass that the days of mourning began to fade. As the sun rose over the land of Israel, casting light upon the shadowy valleys, David, once again filled with purpose, ascended to lead his people from sorrow into the light of hope. He stood before the assembled nation, and with eyes glistening with both loss and resolve, declared, "The Lord has not abandoned his covenant with us. Even now does he weave our lives into a tapestry of grace." The people, still heavy with grief yet inspired by their king's renewed strength, stirred among themselves. Each heart beat in rhythm with the fierce truth that God's hand had not left them. David's voice rang clear, echoing the promises of God. "I have grieved for Absalom, my son, yet we shall not allow despair to govern our hearts. Let us return to the ways of our God and restore the kingdom that he entrusted to us." A wave of unity surged through the crowd as they lifted their spirits, recalling times of victory past, when God had led them like sheep through valleys dark and treacherous. "Together we shall rebuild," they proclaimed, "for even in loss we find strength in one another and in the Lord our God." And so David returned to Jerusalem, where the streets awaited restoration. As he entered the city, a renewed determination surged within him. He knew the path of leadership would not be without trials, yet he was resolute in seeking God's favor. During the days that followed, David sought to mend the fragmented hearts of his people. He reached out to those who had sided with Absalom, offering reconciliation. "Let us not turn against one another, for our strength lies in our unity. Even in our struggles we bear the breath of God upon us," he counseled, his voice saturated with grace and humility. From the ashes of rebellion, David rose not as a king demanding loyalty, but as a shepherd guiding his flock back to safety. His heart was keen to re-establish harmony in the land. Divine wisdom permeated his decisions, and as he reached out, hearts once hardened began to soften, and eyes once downcast reflected the hope kindled anew. Yet amidst this, the whisper of God's purpose emerged. One day, while in quiet reflection, God spoke to David's spirit, reminding him of the promises foretold. "Your throne shall endure forever." In this assurance, David drew strength, recognizing that through his lineage, hope for all of Israel was destined to flourish, a compassionate thread weaving throughout generations. Thus, the nation began to heal, and David instituted reforms, reigniting the worship of Yahweh within the hearts of his people. The people gathered once again in the streets, offering sacrifices, praising God for his mercy amidst the trials. In harmony, they became a community restored, embracing the lessons learned through sorrow and loss. In time, David took to composing songs of praise, his harp echoing in the palace, melodies steeped in faith and remembrance. "O Lord," he sang, "you are my refuge. Even in my pain, your love sustains me. For every trial is a testament to your unfailing example, a refuge to the weary." As days turned to years, the legacy of David lived on, a king who embraced sorrow yet remained steadfast in faith. His heart bore the weight of a father's love and the strength of a ruler renewed. Generations would tell the story of God's redemptive grace, the echoes of a father's lament transforming into a legacy of hope. And it came to pass that through the trials that shaped David, God's grand design unfolded. A lineage blessed, a story of redemption waiting to weave its way into the fabric of all humanity, ushering forth the ultimate promise, the Messiah who would come to save his people from the depths of sin. Let us not forget the power of reconciliation, the promise of hope that blooms even in the darkest of seasons. For as David learned, so shall we, that every sorrow holds the seed of grace, and every loss can lead to profound restoration. Now, dear friends, you need to subscribe now to stay connected to God's Word. This is the moment to help spread biblical truth and share these powerful stories that transform lives. Leave a like now to help spread God's Word through the algorithm. Please tell us in the comments how this biblical story impacted your faith journey. Don't wait even one more second to share this powerful testimony with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth. Together, we can reach more souls for Christ.